tout le monde. Okay, so same objectives as before. By the end of this, you should be able to demonstrate knowledge of geography, history, and cultural practices of Paris, France, and you should be able to discuss the differences and similarities between your own culture and that of Paris. Okay, sport. Just a reminder, if I repeat something multiple times, that's probably something you want to write down. Le Tour de France se termine toujours sur l'avenue des Champs-Élysées en juillet. Le Tour de France se termine toujours sur l'avenue des Champs-Élysées en juillet. Le Tour de France se termine toujours sur l'avenue des Champs-Élysées en juillet. So I'm sure you know, Le Tour de France, it's a big famous bike race. Well, it always ends on the Champs-Élysées, which is a major road. It's actually where you'll find La Défense and l'Arc de Triomphe and Le Louvre at the end. Anyway, so the Tour de France always ends on the Champs-Élysées in July. The Tour de France is a men's multiple-stage bike race that's held mostly in France, but sometimes it crosses into neighboring countries. It has 21-day-long stages that spans 23 days. The course changes every year, but it always goes through the Pyrenees and Alps mountain ranges and always ends in the same place. My cat is very upset he's not getting enough attention. Alors, les internationaux de France ont lieu chaque année au stade Roland-Garros. C'est un tournoi de tennis sur terre battue. Alors, les internationaux de France ont lieu chaque année au stade Roland-Garros. C'est un tournoi de tennis. Alors, les internationaux de France, c'est un tournoi de tennis. So, Les Internationaux de France is a tennis tournament. It's also called the French Open or Roland Garros, named after the stadium that it's always held in. And it's considered to be the most physically demanding tennis tournament in the world because of those clay courts. Le tournoi des 6 nations est un championnat de rugby. Le tournoi des 6 nations est un championnat de rugby. Le tournoi des 6 nations est un championnat de rugby. Les équipes de France, d'Angleterre, d'Écosse, du Pays du Galles, d'Irlande et d'Italie y participent. So le tournoi des 6 nations, it's a rugby championship. If you don't know what rugby is, it's basically like a more hardcore version of American football. They don't wear any protective gear whatsoever, and it's very physical. So the tournament started in the year 2000, and Wales holds the record for the most wins, and Italy and Scotland have never won the title. Okay, le tennis. So tennis originated in France, and many of the terms used internationally in today's game are adaptations of borrowed French words. The word tennis is probably derived from tenez, meaning catch, here you go, be ready. The term originates from the fact that royalty thought it was demeaning to put the ball in play, and they had a servant do it. The score love, which means that the player has 0 points, may be derived from œuf, since an egg and the number 0 have the same shape. Deuce means tied at 40-40, each player having won 3 points. So, any guesses where deuce comes from? It originates from à deux, indicating that a player must win 2 more consecutive points to win the game. Alors, le Panthéon. The Pantheon is a monument in the 5e arrondissement of Paris in an area known as the Latin Quarter. Louis XV ordered its construction as a church in honor of Saint Geneviève, Paris's patron saint. By the time construction was finished, the French Revolution was underway, and the National Assembly voted to change the church into a mausoleum for the remains of important French citizens. So, the Latin Quarter is a part of Paris, and it's traditionally where, way back in the day, students stayed there, and traditionally all lectures were given in Latin, so hence why it's called the Latin Quarter. During the French Revolution, basically the National Assembly, which was the French government at the time, really hated anything to do with the church, so they couldn't be having this, church in honor of Sainte Geneviève, so they changed it into a mausoleum for those remains of important French citizens. They got the idea to use it as a mausoleum from the Pantheon in Rome, which had been used for the same purpose since the 16th century. This is a picture of the Pantheon. I actually took this when I went to Rome last year. And you can see the similarities between the Roman Pantheon and the Parisian Pantheon. The Pantheon currently holds the remains of 78 people. 73 of them are men, and only 5 are women. Some of the people that are interred there that you may have heard of: Voltaire, who wrote Candide, and along with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, their philosophies influenced the thinking of the founding fathers of the American Revolution, because the French Revolution and the American Revolution weren't that far apart. Victor Hugo is interred there. He wrote Les Miserables, or Les Mis. He also wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Louis Braille, who I talked about before, the inventor of Braille, is buried there, or interred there, and so is Jean-Paul Sartre, that famous writer and philosopher. So here you can see where it looks like a church on the inside, because it used to be a church. Ok, science. Marie et Pierre Curie. Marie et Pierre Curie ont fait des recherches sur la radioactivité et ont découvert le polonium et le radium. Ils ont reçu le prix Nobel de physique en 1903. Alors, Marie et Pierre Curie ont fait des recherches sur la radioactivité. Marie et Pierre Curie ont fait des recherches sur la radioactivité et ont découvert le polonium et le radium. Ils ont découvert le polonium et le radium. Ils ont découvert le polonium et le radium. So, Marie and Pierre Curie did research on radioactivity, and they discovered 2 new elements, polonium and radium. They received the Nobel Prize for Physics. Physics, in 1903. When Marie and Pierre Curie first discovered radium, they almost immediately saw the possible impact this chemical element could have on medicine. Not only did they find that radium gives off heat and light, but Pierre discovered that it could damage living organisms when he exposed it to his own flesh. Sounds fun. This meant that new ways to treat cancer and other illnesses might be possible. And both of them are actually interred in the Pantheon. Marie was actually the second woman ever and the first to be buried there based on her own merit, meaning she got buried there because she was important enough on her own. She wasn't linked to anybody else. And there's actually a movie about Marie Curie on Amazon Prime if you're interested. It's called Radioactive. It's pretty good. Le pendule de Foucault. En 1851, le physicien Léon Foucault a créé ce pendule pour montrer la rotation de la Terre sur son axe. Alors, le pendule de Foucault, en 1851, le physicien Léon Foucault a créé ce pendule pour montrer la rotation de la Terre sur son axe. Léon Foucault a créé ce pendule pour montrer la rotation de la Terre sur son axe. So, in 1851, the physicist Léon Foucault created this pendulum to show the rotation of the Earth on its axis. So Foucault's pendulum, again, shows the rotation of the Earth on its axis. So you might be wondering, what does that even mean? I'm going to show you a quick video that kind of explains it better than I ever could.
Is a really big pendulum. And unlike the pendulum in a clock, this Foucault pendulum at the University of Puget Sound is free to swing in any direction. It takes about 8 seconds for it to go from there over to here and back. But that's not the motion that I want to show you. Now, this is not an interactive exhibit, but I have special permission. The motion I want to show you is too slow for you to see, so I'm going to speed things up in this video, about 480 times, so that you only see the pendulum when it's at this point in its swing here. And doing that will compress the next 32 hours into 4 minutes of video. We're going to try science. Played back at this speed, the pendulum appears to move around the room, but that doesn't really grasp what's really happening, because the ground is what's moving. It's rotating. You are watching the world turn. Let me explain. The pendulum ticks back and forth due to the law of inertia, which states that an object in motion stays in motion, unless something acts on it. So the pendulum continues to swing along this plane of motion, and from its point of view, it's just swinging back and forth along that same plane. From the pendulum's point of view, the ground is what's moving. Now, while that's incredible if you ask me, it can also be hard to grasp, so I want you to picture this. A Foucault pendulum placed at the North Pole would appear to complete a clockwise circle once every 24 hours.
So you can see here that it's slowly getting closer to him because the Earth is spinning. The pendulum isn't moving, but the Earth is.
The Earth completes a day by rotating beneath it. But that isn't always the case, because at the poles, the relative rotation between a pendulum and the Earth's axis is at its maximum. So the closer you move a pendulum towards the equator, the longer it takes for a so-called pendulum day to take place. That's the amount of time it takes for a Foucault pendulum to move around the room, as it were. Here at the University of Puget Sound, a pendulum day is about 32.3 hours long. Now, the reason it isn't 24 hours here is because the Earth is a sphere. So, the closer you put a pendulum to the equator, the further it is from the Earth's axis, and the greater the difference in angle between the Earth's axis and the plane that the pendulum is on. The greater that difference is, the less relative rotation there is between the pendulum and the Earth. So it takes at least 24 hours to see one pendulum day, and potentially much longer. You can actually figure out your latitude just by watching and timing a pendulum as it moves in this way, but of course, there's easier ways to do that. It's now 5:30 in the morning, but I'm awake and ready to get back at it. At the equator, a pendulum day lasts forever, and that's because at that location, a pendulum is perpendicular to the axis of rotation. The planet and the pendulum's plane are not moving in relation to one another. Here in the northern hemisphere, Foucault pendulums rotate clockwise because of the Earth's rotation. And that rotation also causes sundial shadows to move clockwise. I mean, it's probably where we got the term clockwise in the first place. If we put a pendulum at the South Pole, it goes counterclockwise, but again, it takes 24 hours. We talk about the sun rising and setting, but that only appears to happen because of Earth's rotation. And up until this experiment was done, we could only assume that the Earth was spinning due to our observations of the sun, of the moon, and of the stars. But no one had figured out how to do an experiment to actually test that until 1851, when a physicist named Leon Foucault came up with this. And that provided the very first simple proof that the Earth rotates. He did all of that using nothing but a pendulum. And if you ask me, that is pretty remarkable. And that is a pendulum day. Now, it's worth noting that most Foucault pendulums on display, like this one, have an electromagnet at the top. But that's just to keep them going forever. You could just use a normal pendulum to do this experiment and get the same results. It just wouldn't last as long. And maybe that's a good thing, because this took me a long time.
Well, hopefully that video explained Foucault's pendulum better than I could have. Anyhow, Foucault did a demonstration of his pendulum inside the Pantheon, which holds a copy of the original. This is his pendulum inside the Pantheon. You might recognize the stone pillars here. La Cité des sciences et de l'industrie. La Cité des sciences et de l'industrie est un musée consacré au progrès de la technologie. Alors, la Cité des sciences et de l'industrie est un musée consacré au progrès de la technologie. La Cité des sciences et de l'industrie est un musée consacré au progrès de la technologie. So La Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie is a museum dedicated to the progress of technology. Since opening its doors in 1986, the Cité des Sciences et de l'Industrie has welcomed over 40 million visitors. It's a popular science park. It consists of several museums and theaters where visitors can engage in interactive activities related to all aspects of science and technology. Exhibits have ranged from the exploration of space and how the brain works to the science of Jules Verne and the digital age. I really enjoy this thing because it reminds me of the giant sphere in Epcot. It's actually the largest science museum in Europe, and it also includes a planetarium, a submarine, an IMAX theater, and special areas for kids and for teens. Gastronomie. Les chocolatiers de Paris. Les chocolatiers de Paris mélangent le chocolat avec des épices, des fruits et même des fleurs pour créer des saveurs nouvelles. Les chocolatiers de Paris mélangent le chocolat avec des épices, des fruits et même des fleurs pour créer des saveurs nouvelles. Les chocolatiers de Paris mélangent le chocolat avec des épices, des fruits et même des fleurs pour créer des saveurs nouvelles. So, chocolate makers of Paris mix chocolate with spices, fruits, and even flowers to create new flavors. So they like to mix in, usually spices would be like chili or cinnamon, fruits like, strawberry, raspberry. They like black currant a lot, which is like a type of berry. It's very tart. And then the flowers that they use are usually either lavender, rose, or orange blossom, which are all delicious. La haute cuisine française. Paris symbolise la haute cuisine française qui est réputée dans le monde entier. So Paris symbolizes haute couture, or I'm sorry, haute cuisine, French haute cuisine, and it's well known throughout the entire world. So you might be wondering what the heck is la haute cuisine? Haute cuisine is characterized by the meticulous preparation and careful presentation of food at a high price. It's the food of high-level establishments, gourmet restaurants, and luxury hotels. So haute cuisine is also called la grande cuisine, and it developed out of political and social changes in France. The high cuisine represented a hierarchy in 17th century France, as only the privileged could eat it. Haute cuisine distinguished itself from regular French cuisine by what was cooked and served, such as foods like tongue and caviar, by serving fruit out of season, by making it difficult and time-consuming to cook, and by using exotic ingredients not typically found in France. Professionally trained chefs are needed to create the extravagant presentations and complex techniques used in haute cuisine. These presentations and techniques these chefs popularized require many ingredients, time, equipment, and therefore money. For this reason, early haute cuisine was accessible to a small demographic of rich and powerful individuals. Pretty much the same as today, to be honest. So let me point out kind of what's going on in these pictures. So in this top picture here, we have a pear on top of what looks like some fish. Another slice of pear, more fish, and then the bottom half of the pear. And then we have a zucchini with some chunks cut out that they've thrown in here. And then I'm not sure what this is, but they love using sauces in haute cuisine, super popular. And then on this one down here, we have some wedges of iceberg lettuce. We have cucumber rolled up to look really fancy. We have some onion here. Some kind of sauce that they made into a cube. I think these are tomato pieces. And then we have more sauce, of course. So, Les restaurants parisiens. Chaque année, les meilleurs chefs reçoivent des étoiles pour la qualité de leur cuisine avec un maximum de 3 étoiles. Il y a plusieurs restaurants 3 étoiles à Paris. Ok. Les restaurants parisiens. Chaque année, les meilleurs chefs reçoivent des étoiles pour la qualité de leur cuisine avec un maximum de 3 étoiles. Chaque année, les meilleurs chefs reçoivent des étoiles pour la qualité de leur cuisine avec un maximum de 3 étoiles. So, each year, the best chefs receive stars for their cuisine with a maximum of 3 stars. There are many 3-star restaurants in Paris. Savais-tu que il y a plus de restaurants à Paris que dans aucune ville de la même grandeur? There are more restaurants in Paris than in any other city of the same size. So I have a picture here of the Guide Michelin, or the Michelin Guide. They were a series of guidebooks published by the French tire company Michelin, or Michelin, and they'd been doing this for more than a century. It usually refers to the annually published Michelin Red Guide, which is the oldest European hotel and restaurant reference guide, which awards up to 3 Michelin stars for excellence to a select few establishments. The acquisition or loss of a star can have dramatic effects on the success of a restaurant. So think about, if I'm sure you've seen Ratatouille. I think in the movie it's like 5 stars, and he loses one because he dies, and then he loses another one, and they're down to 3 stars, and people stop going to the restaurant. Same thing. However, in real life, it's 3 stars. Mode. Les magasins de luxe. Avec ses parfumeries, ses maroquineries et ses autres magasins spécialisés, Paris est la ville idéale pour faire du shopping. Les magasins de luxe, Paris est la ville idéale pour faire du shopping. Paris est la ville idéale pour faire du shopping. So, with its perfume shops, its leather goods shops, and other specialty stores, Paris is the ideal city to go shopping. Les grands bijoutiers. Beaucoup de bijoutiers connus ont leur magasin sur la place Vendôme à Paris. Beaucoup de bijoutiers connus ont leur magasin sur la place Vendôme à Paris. Beaucoup de bijoutiers connus ont leur magasin sur la place Vendôme à Paris. So, many of the well-known jewelers or jewelry shops have their stores at La Place Vendôme in Paris. So some of the jewelers you may have heard of that have stores there are Rolex and Cartier. La haute couture. Paris est la capitale de la haute couture. Les grands couturiers y présentent leurs collections 2 fois par an, au printemps et en automne. Paris est la capitale de la haute couture. Paris est la capitale de la haute couture. Les grands couturiers présentent leurs collections 2 fois par an, au printemps et en automne. Les grands couturiers présentent leurs collections 2 fois par an, au printemps et en automne. So Paris is the capital of haute couture. And the big couture houses present their collections twice a year, in spring and in fall. Haute couture, it's the creation of exclusive custom fitting clothing. Haute couture is high-end fashion that's constructed by hand from start to finish, made from high quality, expensive, and often unusual fabric and sewn with extreme attention to detail. And it's finished by the most experienced and capable sewers, often using time-consuming hand-executed techniques. And haute couture garments, always made for an individual client, and it's tailored specifically for the wearer's measurements and body stance, and it can only be done in Paris. Considering the amount of time, money, and skill allotted to each piece, haute couture garments are also described as having no price tag, meaning the budget is not relevant, meaning you have so much money that it doesn't matter how much it costs because you want what you want. Haute couture is also a protected name that cannot be used except by the firms that meet certain well-defined standards. So not all haute couture is crazy looking like these here. Let's try it again. Like these here. This is an haute couture gown by, I think, Chanel or Dior, and every single little sparkly thing that you see on there was sewn by hand. Okay. Fashion and luxury goods make up an important sector of the French economy. These high-value items include clothes, cosmetics, perfume, jewelry, furs, and leather goods. Industries producing these goods bring in over 28 billion euros in revenue annually and employ over 234,000 people, and many of them are headquartered in Paris. Most of the major French fashion brands, such as Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Dior, Lacroix, are currently headquartered in Paris, as well as numerous international fashion labels, such as Valentino, Gucci, Loewe, Escada, Bottega Veneta, and Burberry. Okay, guys, make sure after you finish watching this video, you go finish the exit ticket.